And yeah, without really any further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker here. I'm really, really excited to have her joining us today. So, Davida is a destination marketer, Black Travel Alliance co founder, and freelance travel writer based in the UK. She has over 10 years' experience in the leisure, travel, and tourism space, including delivering traditional and digital marketing activities for destinations, cruise lines, luxury resorts, and escorted tour operators. Her blog and podcast, Wonders of Wanders, is a creative travel, food, and culture platform that uses the power of storytelling to captivate audiences, inspire wanderlust, and prompt action, all with a generous helping of heart and humor. She's been named among Europe's travel industry leaders, tourism changemakers, and UK travel thought leaders and content creators to follow. So thank you so much for joining us, Davida. Um, I'll hand it over to you to take things away.
Thanks, Julia. So yes, hi everyone. I think Julia has done a great intro. So just to quickly round up, destination marketer for Coventry's year as UK City of Culture 2021. I'm a travel storyteller and founder of Wonders of Wonders, a travel, food, and culture platform and podcast, and a co-founder of Black Travel Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization that was founded to support Black travel content creators around the world and increase their representation in the travel industry, including areas like employment, conferences, and media campaigns. And I'm very excited to be here, so thank you for making the time. Coming up, we are going to be looking at creating an engaged community of tourism ambassadors. We will start by looking at benefits of ambassador programs, how to make sure you are inclusive in your approach, how to keep your ambassadors engaged from a DMO and a creator perspective. Since I have the unique benefit of straddling both worlds, and we'll finish up with press tips to get your content noticed. And hopefully we'll have left enough time for any questions that come up. So without further ado, we will jump into part one, benefits of ambassador programs. So the first benefit that I want to share on is positive word of mouth marketing. I grew up in Ghana at my grandmother's feet, listening to her stories on starlit nights and listening to her travel tales and adventures from traveling the country. And it was here that I developed a love of storytelling and also, crucially for this discussion, how much it means when people you trust tell you things or recommend things to you. Choice can be endless and overwhelming. And so we inadvertently rely on trusted people to guide where we want to go, to help us simplify the process. And this ultimately is what your ambassadors do for you. In order to fully appreciate how your ambassadors can be positive word of mouth marketers for you, I want to first of all challenge you to expand your definition of who your ambassadors even might be. They are your residents, they are your local businesses, your destination stakeholders, your employees, your visitors, content creators, friends and family, and so on. And together, in their own way, they achieve the goal of highlighting why your destination is a great place to live, work, and visit, and stimulate positive word of mouth marketing that enhances the entire visitor experience. We as people know intuitively that people trust people. Therefore, when someone you know personally or otherwise, for example, in the case of my grandmother from way back when somebody shares a story or statement, you assign it a far greater trust value than an ad or a sponsored story. The next thing that I want to talk about in terms of benefits of ambassador programs is that it helps to cultivate a community of super fans. And the sub point to that is that it helps to bring pride to the community when the marketing features locals. Now, we are a virtual room of industry insiders, so we don't need to belabor how much the pandemic has impacted travel in particular, as many of us, work in the industry and only know it too well. However, one thing that has come out of it that we're seeing, and I'm absolutely here for and would like to see more of, is letting local people drive destination narratives. This is great for building sustainable domestic tourism, which we have seen is very, very important. especially at a time like this when international travel is so much more complicated. The other sub point to this that I want to stress is that it also helps to influence the visitor journey from awareness through to advocacy. Now, the visitor journey we know is got several stages to it. There's, awareness, there's consideration, there's booking, traveling, staying, and at the end of that, you hope that you have made advocates of the people that have come to your destination. And you've got to understand that at every stage, your destination is being experienced differently by different people. As such, building fan content into every stage of the journey in an authentic way will be critical to speaking to audiences at key points of the journey. You can make the most of it, whether they're first time visitors, repeat visitors, or locals. So, for instance, if somebody is at the awareness stage, you might consider the type of content that will speak to them. And they might look something like 10 reasons to visit X. This is putting it on their radar. So if they haven't considered it, suddenly they're like, oh, okay, there's a viable option there. Then if somebody's a first-time visitor to your destination, don't think that you can't leverage their experience, because in fact, they are able to then bring the perspective of a first-time visitor. And so that content might look like tips from a first-time visitor to X. And I had a first-time experience about 2 years ago on a cruise. And after that, I was invited to share my experience as a first timer to that type of cruise. And I was able to then take my audience along in that way. And if somebody's a repeat visitor, again, they can you can leverage that to build on, hey, have you been here before? Okay, why don't you go here next time instead? Then that way you also funnel them to other less visited parts of your destination and help them to explore even more, as well as spend within the local economy. The next point that I want to highlight on benefits of ambassador programs is that it helps to broaden your marketing reach. Your ambassadors help broaden well beyond what DMO budgets can cover. They tend to do it among audiences who trust them, which in turn aggregates and further reach. And so cultivating ethical collaborations with such people provides you with an endless resource for user-generated content that you can then leverage to strengthen your destination story. So then, moving on to the next part is how to make sure that you are inclusive in your approach. The first part that I want to highlight is to reflect reality and celebrate difference. Listen, the world is a kaleidoscope, and travel offers one of the best ways to experience all the colors, the flavors, and endless possibilities that means for your destination. And you should show that in your approach to ambassador programs. People are your best assets. I always say people, local people in general make the best ambassadors. And so you want to actively seek out diverse content creators and make sure you're not being tokenistic in your inclusion. And one of the best ways to avoid tokenism is not to be a quote unquote one and done collaborator. Example, don't only look for Black content creators for Black History Month or LGBT plus content creators during Pride Month. I mean, again, we are a room full of travel enthusiasts. So we travel for the same types of reasons that everyone else does in terms of adventure, discovery, connecting with people, connecting with cultures, and all of that. And so it's very important to cultivate ethical programs that engage people meaningfully at all times, not just when it looks good for optics. The other important thing to highlight here is that you want to also maintain open channels of communication that ensure that you're taking a wide demography of audiences into consideration. So I've already kind of spoken about Black travelers, LGBT plus travelers, solo female travelers, travelers with accessibility requirements, older travelers, plus size travelers, travelers with specific cultural and religious backgrounds or needs. It's also a great opportunity to promote your local businesses and help people connect to parts of your destination or experiences within your destination that might cater specifically to their type of demographic. Empathy, leading with empathy, is the birthplace of great destination marketing, and being cognizant of that difference is a key to letting your destination stand out. An example that I've recently enjoyed is NYC Go. For some time now, they've been doing various things in terms of sharing different campaigns, highlighting different heritage that the city celebrates. There's the All In NYC. There's a Black experience that has sort of focused on Black businesses and things like that. Um, I think it's been a great example of seeing how you can explore the breadth of experiences that your destination can offer by looking at different perspectives as championed by your ambassadors. Then the second point I want to raise on how you can make your programs inclusive is to work with the right people, not just the obvious one. So I want to reiterate that the right people might not look the way you think they look. They are your businesses, they are your locals, they are your travelers, they are, broaden that definition and run with it. And an example that I want to mention to illustrate this point is Visit Stockton. I really love their website. Um, their website uses visuals to show off various parts of the destination. It features interactive galleries of user generated content at the top of almost every page. And for me, it's almost like as soon as you land on the website, you are shown a window into the world of this place in California. And it's a world that combines both locals and other travelers. And it feels very organic to me as as a curious traveler that might be just interested to see how day-to-day life or how their day-to-day businesses are like. It's very authentic for me. And that's a great example of how you can work across the breadth of ambassador types that there could be to your destination. And then the third point that I want to speak on in terms of making sure you're inclusive in your approach is to partner with relevant organizations and travel groups. This is a way for you to grow and build trust among underrepresented communities. It's a way for you to see a different side to your own destination that you might not have considered before. It's also a way for you to show actionable support for organizations and groups doing work on the ground. And it's also a way for you to move the needle in being part of the change that our industry as a whole so desperately needs to build back better after the reset that the pandemic has, caused for travel. And the fourth point is let your fans do the talking. You have fans worldwide who love to share the good memories they've had in your destination. Travel is such a powerful connector, is such an emotive experience, such a life-changing, transformative experience. And memory making is such a big part of why we travel. I'm sure we could all rattle off at least 3 to 5 destinations that we've been to that have shaped a little bit of how we are now, perhaps because of the time, the season that we were in. And so we remember these places with a special kind of sentimentality, and that's great. Leverage on the memories that people have of your destination. And practically, that might look like this campaign that Thailand did in partnership with Traverse. It was about sharing your memories of amazing Thailand. It was a call out for content creators to share their memories from as far back as 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It wasn't restrictive in terms of, oh, you only had to have visited in the last 1 year or last few months or whatever it was. And you'll find when you look into this campaign that the content produced spanned videos, written pieces that covered travel tips, planning a wedding, planning a workation in Chiang Mai, rock climbing. I mean, then suddenly you're looking at Thailand with various like multi-layered eyes of possibilities. And that's something that Thailand did that I thought was a great example. Murcia, which is a region in Spain, also did a similar campaign. And I've spoken about the NYC Go example with like the Black experience where various businesses are being profiled, various people, individuals are being profiled. There's also now Travel Ready that's happening in Kenya in partnership with local hotels. So again, you are driving the narrative from various perspectives that cover your businesses, that cover the individuals, that cover, travelers, that cover everyday residents. So explore all those possibilities. And we might wrap this section up with 4 tips to help you find the right people. Tip one is to deep dive into those who have already created content about you. And bear in mind, this is often unsolicited. These are people you would find when you dedicate some search time on Instagram, on blogs, Google, YouTube, etc. Tip number two is to identify common values and don't just focus on vanity metrics or follower numbers. For example, the shared values for your target audiences at the time that you might need it is for maybe they have a focus on outdoor adventure, or they have a strong focus on storytelling or food culture or Gen Z travel, etc. Identify those values that are actually evergreen, as opposed to just perhaps dismissing people because they don't reach a particular metric of followership or whatever, because by doing that you are missing out on great people that could champion your destination and with whom you might have natural alignment. Tip number three is to participate in dedicated creator conferences. Traverse, that I've mentioned before, is Europe-based, and so a lot of the creators are typically based in the UK or other parts of Europe. And so if, for instance, you're looking for to get into these markets, this might be a good conference to participate in as a DMO to meet these types of creators, or the types of people that might align with you. WITS, that's Women in Travel, as the name suggests, is for women. So again, a helpful one to go to if you're looking for a particular type of creator. And of course, Black Travel Alliance Wavelength is also dedicated one to connect Black travel content creators with destination management organizations and travel brands. So being intentional about where you'd spend your kind of conference budgets is also a very key part of connecting with the right people. And the last tip is to ask. Your audience, as well as those ahead of you, can share pointers. There is absolutely nothing wrong with actually sometimes just asking the question and listening to the answers that come in. And you will find the patterns, you'll find other things that come from left field that again you hadn't thought of, but it gives you something to go on. Because remember, it's an ongoing relationship building and not one and done. Our next part is how to keep your ambassadors engaged. As I said earlier, we're looking at it from both ends of the coin, as it were. So the first part is from a DMO perspective. Number one is to have a destination story. Tell it well, tell it often, tell it from different angles, tell it with conviction, because your ambassadors will feed off that conviction. And sometimes you might even want to consider, again, throwing the question out, let people answer the question on one thing, just one thing they love about your destination. And again, sit back and listen to the answers, because that could give you all manner of ideas that you can then pull stories from. And remember, it's not just the one story. There's a big story and various stories feed into that. And together you have that cohesive picture. The next point on how to keep your ambassadors engaged from a DMO perspective is newsletters. Encourage your superfans to sign up to hear from you. So often we focus on, getting signups for just potential new visitors, and you miss out on talking to those who are already championing you. But you can change that. And newsletters are one of the best ways to build intimacy, share destination updates, and nurture loyalty that leads to repeat visits. And then the third point that I want to raise is to amplify content. Find the people who are already talking favorably about you. Share their content, their tags, their mentions, and amplify them as much as possible. And also consider creating a dedicated hub on your website for this type of content. And I would like to illustrate in three particular ways. So on Twitter, for instance, I shared about going to a particular place in London, and the brand in question just code tweeted and reshared. That's a very simple way to do that. Another example is I took another type of cruise. I shared with my audience, unsolicited. I wasn't working with the brand or anything of that sort. I just happened to share it because I'm an oversharer. Sue me. So I shared that. And then I created a podcast because, of course, I do have the storytelling angle. So I went that extra step to create a podcast for it. And then the brand also shared that on their platform. And the third example is having a dedicated hub. Hamburg in Germany have a hub like this, which I think is a great way to collate some of the stories and content that other people are creating about you. So again, think about how you can make it easier for people to, find other people's content that they've created. Because remember that, this is also social proof. It's not just what you say about yourself, it's what others say about you. So make the most of what is out there already. The next point I want to highlight on keeping your ambassadors engaged from a DMO perspective is to get active on Twitter. People on Twitter are receptive, they are engaged, and they're influential. And they come to the platform with a discovery mindset. So get active there as a DMO and participate in some of the popular travel chats there, or start your own. Some of the popular ones are The Road Less Traveled, Travel Talk on Twitter, Food Travel Chat, Part-Time Travel. There are so many of them, but these four are quite popular. So as a DMO, you can plug relevant things within that. A regular Twitter chat can be a good way to show that you care and you are listening. And then the next point is to connect outside of social. So, of course, we've been hampered by what's currently happening. But once it's safe to do so, try to establish stronger relationships with your super fans. Plan meetups, sip and paints, press trips, other in-person activities whenever that is possible to do, because that in-person connection is still very important as soon as it's safe to do so, of course. And then we will move then on to the creator perspective. What are some of the ways that you can engage your ambassadors from a creator perspective? I put this question out to some people. I've had various discussions offline actually, and it's been really, again, I sat down and sifted through all the responses that were coming in from the discussions. And so I'm going to share 4 things that were recurring. So the first one is to communicate clearly. Many creators will engage with your destination based on the messaging that you're putting out about it. And they will also typically engage maybe from a perspective of having participated in a press trip or, some kind of content creator trip. And so reiterating that earlier point I made about knowing your destination stories and communicating them well will be one of the key ways that you'll keep your creators engaged. The next point to this is to leave room for independent exploration. You've got to remember that your superfans are speaking to audiences who trust them and follow them because of their unique perspectives on destination exploration. So you don't have to be too prescriptive when working with creators and trying to kind of define exactly how they should showcase your destination. In fact, if you give a bit of room, you'll find that there's a lot more authentic, a lot more organic exploration of your destination in a way that resonates with the audiences that they have. And so to do that, we'll move on to the next point, which is collaborate on building engaging itineraries. You want to leverage the wealth of experiences that different people will have had in your destination. Just think, if someone has experienced it and raved about it in your destination, there's a potential audience for it. It also allows you to explore the variety of ways and perspectives you could bring to one thing, including those you might have missed. And so if you have several creators coming, you don't necessarily need to hand them, the same type of itinerary. You could have conversations, pull out the things that they're interested in, that their audiences have expressed interest in and are keen to engage with when they visit your destination. And you'll find that out of perhaps one press trip or content creator trip, you can explore so many different perspectives. And I would imagine that is value for both money and time. So why restrict? Why be prescriptive? You don't need to do that. Rather, you can collaborate on building those like engaging itineraries. And the last point I want to highlight on this from a creative perspective is to make the most of their organic audiences. Again, remember that your creators have spent a lot of time cultivating organic audiences who trust them. And part of nurturing a key relationship will be tapping into that and finding links to authentic points of connection with their existing audience. So embrace all of that. And I try not to make promises in life, but I do promise that you will have a better bang for your buck. And then we'll move on to this section, which is press tips to get your content noticed. So, done all that work, there's content now. How are you going to get it noticed? The first thing is to distribute effectively via your social media, your owned media, email, website, paid media strategy, hashtags, your advertising, your print collateral, and much more, as well as being part of relevant online conversations about your destination. The next is repurpose, repurpose, repurpose. Repurposing is the name of the game. Ask yourself, can you use a compilation of your content that's already out there as a downloadable ebook or a planning guide for future travelers to your destination? Can it be serialized as an editorial feature that readers or viewers can come to expect on a rolling basis so that they know to keep coming back? Can you turn it into a podcast? My own podcast is a study in repurposing because the source material is already pieces of content that I've written. And over the pandemic, I decided to turn it into a storytelling podcast because I have a strong storytelling focus. I thought it was an idea that I've had for years, and I thought, okay, I think now might be a time to, action that idea. And so I decided to repurpose my written pieces of content into audio format. And what that has given me is a new way to relate to my audience because I'm literally in their ear, taking them along in a different way. So again, it gives you another medium to explore, perhaps, if you haven't looked into it. I mean, podcasts, as we know, are blowing up more and more with each passing day. And so destinations that get ahead of that curve will be the ones that, further down the line, we remember because you're able to carry your audience along, whether they're with you or you are building up that, that excitement when they're about to visit you. A destination that has started a podcast is Visit Beaufort. So I would encourage everyone to just go check out that. I think it's called the Inner Coastal Podcast. So check it out, see how the format works, see maybe if you can, again, get your ambassadors, your residents, your businesses, your locals, congregating various conversations around in a podcast format that then becomes things that, it's evergreen content that it can be easily listened to when somebody's out there running or driving or whatever. So you can, again, build that, enthusiasm for the destination, even if they're not there yet. Also consider, can it be used as a shout out, still on the topic of repurposing, or as a what they said about us, as a compilation of social proof? Because again, remember, it's not just what you say about yourself, but what others say about you. So always think creatively around ways that you can take something that already exists and give it new life. The next point I want to highlight is to make use of real-time conversation. So I've already spoken about Twitter chats because as a creator and as an active Twitter user, I think that this is a really, really critical, like a key element of keeping that informational element going. Your visual mediums, Instagram, YouTube, all of that, they work very well for inspirational content. But when you want to move on into conversation, into informational content, I think Twitter is a great way to keep that momentum going. But not just that, you can also take advantage of other real-time conversations, like having an Instagram live around interesting destination themes. Plugging in relevant content around those themes will be key. Host an ambassador takeover, invite your ambassadors to tackle different topics from their perspectives, as first-time visitors, local residents, local businesses, and so on. So always think laterally about how you can make the most of these partnerships and collaborations in real time. And then the last point I want to highlight on this is to involve your destination stakeholders. Very little can be accomplished within a destination if stakeholders are not working together. And so community alignment is vital to this. Practically, this might look like having comms packs ahead of time for specific campaign rollouts. And in your comms pack, you might include press releases, social graphics, um, tweets, and captions that your destination stakeholders can use to help you amplify what you are doing or whatever the content is. There's a tendency sometimes in tourism for people to, or for businesses or groups or whatever, to work in silos, which, it kind of is almost, it makes the effort quite disjointed. Whereas if you pull the resources together and shout each other out, help your destination stakeholders, everybody kind of shouting each other out and shouting out what's happening, then you build that cohesive picture together. And so taking that partnership slash, collaborative destination approach is critical to building the big picture destination story upon which other stories, other story angles hang. So don't forget your destination stakeholders when you are, planning various pieces of content and getting, in order to get it noticed. So I would like to end really on 3 key takeaways from today. Your ambassadors are your North Star. They can always be found. The key is to broaden your scope of who your ambassadors might be. Your residents, your employees, your stakeholders, your local businesses, your friends and family, creators, visitors, etc. The list is quite long. And then finally, to remember that it is an ongoing relationship. So seek to create meaningful long-term collaborations and avoid tokenism. So I think we have left enough time for any questions that might have arrived.
Amazing. Davida, thank you so much. That was wonderful. We do have a few questions here. I will start at with Amanda's question. And Amanda's wondering if you know of any Canadian specific conferences that would be helpful, perhaps for, I'm assuming, like growing your network of ambassadors or influencers, or even perhaps general travel related conferences around community building and the topics you spoke of today.
I don't know of it offhand, but I do know some Canada-based content creators, and I'll be more than happy to send through a list to you, Julia, that you might be able to pass on.
Yes, yeah, that would be really wonderful.
Okay, I shall do that. Yeah.
Perfect. And Heather is wondering, can you offer examples of websites that have a good hub for external content about our destinations, about other destinations?
I'm not sure. Is it, for instance, the Hamburg example that I shared, that has a hub for other people's content that they've kind of pulled together?
I believe that is what Heather is gesturing to. um, yeah, if you have any examples off the top of your head, yeah.
Yes, I think if you Google Blogger Hub Hamburg, I think that should bring that up. But that would be an example of a sort of hub page where, it's collating what other content creators have written about the destination. And again, it covers a breadth of experiences from food culture to the music heritage of Hamburg and things like that. So I think that's a great example to perhaps give people some ideas of how they can bring all of that together, whatever's happening from different creators or ambassadors. And of course, there was that Visit Stockton example as well. And I particularly like that because it covers kind of other travelers' own own piece of content that they've shared, and it also links or gives addresses and things like that. So as an interested traveler, if I see a picture or something that catches my eye and I click on it, I've got some more context about the place. And I think that's another a great way to kind of funnel people around the destination and show the everyday element of it. Because you know, when we travel, we're always talking about being in search of or wanting to live like the locals do. And I think that's a great way to point people and just offer people a window into the world of your destination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And question from Brandy. They are a DMO with a new website, and they're trying to find other great sites to backlink to their site. They've worked with some great content creators who they've brought into their destination to write about them. However, if they find quality content written about their destination, is it appropriate for them to reach out to those people to ask to include my website link in their article in exchange for including their article on the in the news section I am building for their website? So reaching out for backlinks in exchange for, it looks like, a little bit more exposure to their content.
Right. Okay. I think so I've kind of deliberately avoided speaking from a more commercial perspective because I think that there are some considerations when you are reaching out to a creator in a way that, you know, if you haven't established some kind of rapport with yet, because then they might look at it as you are using their content commercially. So then if you approach it based on exposure, that might not necessarily be a good way for them because they're thinking that you are coming in as a big DMO, you have the funds to back it, all of that. So I think it's important in the first place to try to establish some kind of rapport, try to establish a way in which you might be able to collaborate sustainably and come to an agreement. Whether money is changing hands, that's going to be a conversation that the two parties need to have. But I think that there needs to be a kind of an honest approach and an ethical way to engage so that both parties are happy with that. Because it's not on me as an individual creator to kind of say what's right or wrong, because some creators will be absolutely happy with that exposure or that traffic from a DMO side to theirs. So I think you need to, as a DMO, you need to consider how you can make the partnership beneficial beyond exposure. If, for instance, this is not where that creator is at that point. So just that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's that's a really great point. And when you're looking through your lists of Canadian creators to recommend, if you have any Southern US based content creators to recommend, Brandy is saying that would be really, really helpful too.
Southern US based. Okay. I'm just making a note in my.
Awesome. And Susan here is asking, wondering about repurposing content from a DMO perspective. Is this something that creators are generally okay with, or is additional permission required if you're reusing their content in a different format?
I think it's quite polite to perhaps reach out before, or again, like I say, establish that rapport. So after I shared that example about the cruise that I'd done and they reposted it, over the course of, you know, booking that cruise and taking the cruise, and even afterwards, we had built a rapport to the point when I then published that piece, I felt comfortable enough to share with the brand and say, hey, here's a piece that I've written about the experience that I had. Of course, it was such a positive experience as well that for me, it was as a writer, as a storyteller, and all of that, it was very organic for me to publish it on my site, and then again reach out to the brand to say, I've written this piece. And then they replied very enthusiastic and said, oh, this is so lovely. Thank you so much for sharing. Are we able to reshare? So for me, I was completely okay with it because, like I said, we had established rapport over the point of going from considering that cruise to booking it to then experiencing it and having such a great time that it was natural for me to then, having done that, publishing, to share it. So I think that if you if you go in cold, that might not necessarily have a good effect. So you want to, really seek to create community. I believe that at this point I've established a good relationship with that particular brand. So it's really important to go in with a long-term mentality to want to perhaps do something with the creator. Because if their content is kind of good enough to use in your marketing or in resharing or in repurposing, that for me means that there's a way in which you can work on developing some kind of collaboration beyond just resharing their work, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, makes sense. So how do you go up about, or how would you recommend approaching a possible ambassador once you've identified this individual? Sometimes these creators look for compensation for their content as well, which may not be in a DMO's budget.
Um, I think it's great to do your research about the creator because sometimes people reach out and it's very obvious within, I don't know, the first 3 words or first paragraph that they haven't done any kind of research into what type of creator you are, why they're even, reaching out. So because perhaps your email is out there, so people are constantly kind of reaching out to you in a way that doesn't align. I think as with all things in life, if somebody's approaching you and you see that they have actually they've taken that extra step to perhaps familiarize themselves with your website, with what type of work you do or what type of content you create, and why they think you would be a great ambassador for their brand. That is a good way to initially begin the conversation. But again, various creators are, they will have various ways in which they approach this conversation. If, for instance, a creator, this is their main source of income, they might have a very, very different approach to somebody who might have a day job and this is something that they are doing in addition to that. So I think it's really important to have an honest conversation. If you don't have a budget for it now, it doesn't mean you might not have a budget for it later. So again, it's all about establishing the relationship, seeing how you can collaborate in a way that is equitable for both parties. Because again, it might be that you establish that, okay, perhaps we will do 3 things over the next period of time. This first instance, you might produce an article and we'll share it in these and that ways. The next time, it means that maybe the next time we might host you on a trip and you produce this type of content, and perhaps the creator will then say, okay, if I come on this trip, you might pay for X, Y, and Z. Like, people, you need to have a conversation. It can't be prescriptive because people are engaged in this work in a variety of ways. So it's not up to me to kind of say, this is the right way or this is the wrong way. That would be, far be it from me, because I understand that people have various ways in which they are engaging in this work. But the key thing is for both parties to come away feeling that they have an understanding of what this collaboration is, how it's going to work out, and that crucially, it's something that is viable and it's a meaningful way to engage with each other. Because again, if somebody has shared something about your destination or the experience they've had there, you're already building on that positive experience. So, approaching with the right attitude and with the right heart for the work or the collaboration will be very, very key. So that's something to consider.
Perfect. And yeah, final question here as we're approaching top of the hour. Do you have a takeover plan for when ambassadors or influencers do a takeover of your social media? Or from a creative perspective, do you prefer the DMO coming to you with a plan? just to ensure that things stay in hand and on schedule? Or do you prefer maybe carte blanche when it comes to doing a takeover on um, perhaps your Instagram channels, like specifically?
I think it's, as a creator, I would want to understand what sort of objectives the DMO has, and what sort of takeover it is. Perhaps in the earlier example that I shared, if I'm sharing something from my perspective as a first time visitor to the destination, I might approach it differently compared to if it's a place that maybe it's London. I live in London and I've been approached to do something from my perspective as a Londoner, a local, and to share an activity that I enjoy doing, which for instance might be walking. I really love walking. This picture that's currently on the screen, I took on my walk. um, so, so I think you have to have a conversation about what the key objectives of the takeover are. You might agree to then produce whatever it is that needs producing. You might supply the images or the pieces of content that might actually be in the takeover. But crucially, I keep stressing about conversation a lot, because I think that so much can get lost in translation or lost in assumption. So it's really important to establish very clear communications from early. Jump on a call, jump on a Zoom, whatever is easiest, but make sure that you are having those conversations pretty early to understand how the creator even goes about their process. Because again, you might introduce a process that is completely stressful or very different to how they operate. Whereas if each party listens to the other, you're able to adapt. And I think that's is a key thing. Both parties should be prepared to adapt to certain things, reasonably. I'm not saying people should be unreasonable in how they approach or how they handle things, but I am saying that a conversation to initially clear the air, build rapport, establish, what the objectives are and how you might go about it is really, really key to who's having a successful takeover.
Mhm. Wonderful. Davida, this is all the time we have for today, unfortunately, but thank you so, so much for your insights and wisdom and knowledge. It's been really, really wonderful having you. Um, and I see you've put up your contact information there. If folks had questions that were unanswered, if it's all right with you, I imagine some might reach out. Yeah. Any kind of closing
Absolutely.
thoughts or ideas before we let people go?
No, I just want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you everyone for joining. I have enjoyed sharing with you on Create and Engage Community of Tourism Ambassadors. And yes, I've put my contact details out there. I myself am passionate about travel storytelling and destination marketing. So if anybody is interested in continuing this conversation in any format, um, please do reach out. I am on LinkedIn. My email is there, my website as well. So thank you again. And I am at the end of one of these various forms of contact. So let's keep the conversation going, certainly.